In a place where the sun burns the ground by noon and the wind carries nothing but sand, water is more than precious. It's everything. Without it, there's no life. Without it, there's no hope. So when all around you is dry, cracked earth, where do you find water? How do you quench your thirst when there are no rivers, no machines, no maps? These people not only survived there, they thrived. And 7,000 years ago in the deserts of the Middle East, North Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula, people managed to survive in the toughest conditions imaginable. They didn't have modern tools, no tractors, no drills, not even a metal shovel. And yet they dug holes over 30 meters deep to reach the water table. They didn't have fancy surveying equipment either, and yet they somehow avoided hitting the pockets of poisonous gases below the ground. They literally found water using nothing but their instincts, their patience, and ancient wisdom passed down over generations. This is how they did it Tand, why their method still works today. This is The Forgotten Path, where we bring you stories of survival from history. Before drilling rigs, metal shovels, or even metal tools of any kind, desert tribes had to develop ingenious ways to find water under the punishing sun. They would look for clues left by animals. Insects such as ants prefer moist soil, so if a colony built its home in a particular patch of sand, it was a good sign. Birds circling low over the same spot at dawn meant there was water nearby. Even the color of desert plants, a slightly deeper shade of green among miles of beige, was a clue that something was moving beneath the surface. When they spotted what looked like a small hill in the distance, they approached cautiously. A false alarm would waste precious energy, and survival depended on being smart about it. As they got closer, they observed the ants marching up the slope. Encouraged by their discovery, they moved on, scanning the horizon for signs of life, or more accurately, for signs of moisture. When they eventually found it, they knew they were looking at a mountain of clay. Clay holds water like a sponge, so it was a good sign that there was something there. They decided to dig. But before they picked up a tool, they observed the area closely. They chose a shady spot under a rock and collected stones, arranging them in a circle around their future well. Then they started the long process of digging. It was hard work. The air grew heavy, the sun beat down, and the risk of exhaustion was high, but they kept going. The goal was too important. First, they made a shallow depression in the center of their stone circle. Then they started filling it with water, little by little, testing different spots. When the water soaked into the ground faster than it could fill up, they knew they were on the right track. They kept digging until they reached a depth of several meters. That was about as deep as they dared to go without support. So next, they lined the walls of the pit with stones. But to prevent them from collapsing, they filled the space between the stones with clay. At the same time, they used palm wood to reinforce the sides, making sure everything stayed in place. The result was a sturdy shaft leading down into the earth. Now they needed to extract the water. But before they did, they took some of the water from the bottom of the well and put it in a container. Then they took it back to the village for analysis. The key thing they were looking for was salt. If the water had a lot of it, it wasn't usable. But if it tasted fresh, they knew they had hit the jackpot. The whole process of digging a well took a lot of time. Took a few weeks, sometimes even months to dig deep enough to reach the water table. But once completed, each well could supply water for several families. And because wells were often located near villages, the community shared them. They also dug wells near farmlands and oases to water crops and livestock. Wells were considered sacred places where people went to pray and give thanks for the water they provided. Some desert tribes believed that the water in wells had memory, that it recognized the hands, that it dug it out, and would remember those who treated it respectfully. Some wells were simple affairs dug by hand, with little more than a digging stick. Others were more elaborate, built with stone and mortar. Over the centuries, people perfected the art of well digging, coming up with new techniques and tools to help them reach the water table. Today, we take the availability of water for granted. We turn on the tap and expect water to flow, but it wasn't always this way. Our ancestors had to work hard to find water, and they developed ingenious ways of doing so. One of the most impressive feats of engineering was the Qanat, a system of underground tunnels used to bring water from remote mountain springs to oases and farms. The Qanat was invented in Iran more than 2,500 years ago, and it's still in use today. Wells were dug by hand using simple tools such as a digging stick or a basket. The process was slow and arduous, but it was necessary to sustain life in the harsh desert environment. Once a well was dug, the water was drawn up using a bucket and rope. This was also a time-consuming task. But it was made easier by the invention of the Archimedes screw, a device that used a screw-shaped tube to pump water from a lower to a higher level. For thousands of years, people lived off the land, hunting wild animals and gathering wild plants for food. But as populations grew, people had to find new ways to sustain themselves. Agriculture was born, and with it, the need for water to irrigate crops. Canals were built to bring water from rivers to the fields, and dams were constructed to hold back the flow of water and provide a steady supply for irrigation. But the real challenge was finding water in the desert. In this inhospitable environment, water was scarce, and finding it required ingenuity and determination. But people persevered, and they developed some truly amazing technologies to find water in the desert. One of the most impressive was the invention of the camel. Camels are well adapted to desert life and can go for long periods without water. They also have the ability to carry large loads, making them ideal for transporting water from one place to another. The camel saddle was designed to carry large containers of water, and the camel's hump allowed it to store fat that could be used as a source of energy and water when food and water were scarce. But perhaps the greatest feat of engineering was the invention of the windmill. Windmills were used to pump water from underground aquifers to the surface. This invention was a game changer, allowing people to tap into the vast reserves of groundwater that were available in the desert. Today, we take the availability of water for granted, turn on the tap, and expect water to flow. But it wasn't always this way. Our ancestors had to work hard to find water, and they developed ingenious ways of doing so. From the camel to the windmill, these inventions allowed people to thrive in some of the harshest environments on Earth. Some say the most amazing part of all this is that many of these ancient wells are still used today. Thousands of years later, they continue to provide water for people in the same areas where they were first dug. Modern geologists who study these wells are amazed by what they find. Many of these wells align with underground aquifers and fault lines, which means that the people who dug them must have had some knowledge of the geology of the area. Others have found that the wells are located near ancient caravan routes, suggesting that they were used by travelers to water their animals. Still others have found evidence that the wells were used for ritual purposes, such as burying the dead. But perhaps the most amazing thing about these ancient wells is that they are still in use today. In a world where everything is constantly changing, these wells are a reminder of the ingenuity and resourcefulness of our ancestors. They are a testament to the fact that human beings can adapt and survive in even the most challenging environments. If you want to know more about ancient survival tips and tricks, then check out the links in the description below. Also, don't forget to leave us a like and tell us what you thought about this video in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay safe.